Hello. Today I want to talk about a short story by Hugh Cave called Murgunstrumm. This is a I think of it as being like a crime story slash horror story, but I think it might be a subgenre called Weird Menace, which is sort of like basically that, like detective or crime type stories blended with like supernatural type horror stories. That's definitely what this is. Hubie Cave was a pulp writer who like sort of transitioned away from that at some point and wrote other things. But he's known mostly for writing horror and science fiction and weird menace type tales. But he also wrote romance and like straight fiction and all other kinds of stuff. In fact, he wrote something like 800 short stories throughout his career, a huge number. He also wrote although I don't know anything about it, he also wrote a nonfiction book about voodoo, which is known. I don't know anything about it, so I can't say that it's well regarded or not. I know that it's a known thing that he did, and he knew a lot about voodoo apparently. Really a super fun story. Murgunstrumm is probably best found in the collection Murgunstrumm. I don't know where it was originally published, but it was reprinted in '77 through the efforts of Carl Edward Wagner. And in the introduction to Murgunstrumm and others, basically Hubie Cave talks about how Wagner contacted him and said that he wanted to reprint some of Cave's works. Was that okay? And Cave was like, sure. I used to have copies of everything I wrote, except that I had a house fire and all my old copies are destroyed. So I have no idea what these stories you want to reprint are like. Are they any good? And Wagner's like, oh yeah, they're really great. He's like, well, okay then. So like, it's kind of funny that he wrote so much that he just like didn't know or had only a vague sense of what some of these stories were. I don't know that Murgunstrumm is the best known story from this. I found this writer and this story through a video that's a couple years old now by Sandy Peterson. And he had a video where he talked about like 31 horror stories that you can read for free or something, or read cheaply. And most of that list are like public domain stories or something that you can go anywhere. Like Horror Babble has a lot of them, or you can get free ebooks for a lot of them or find them online for free. I think Murgunstrumm is one of the very few from that list that's not available there. And I can talk a little bit more about that list and Peterson at the end of this. But that's how I found Hubie Cave, and it sounded really interesting. There's Sandy Peterson in that video. I'll have a link to that video too. Talked about that and really got me interested. Now, I did do a review of this in sort of like, I don't know what it was. It was probably like a book haul or something like that I did a couple years ago. And my initial review was kind of like, this was good, but it's really silly sometimes. And that's kind of accurate. So I wanted to reread it. I wanted to revisit it. I actually want to reread and kind of revisit that entire list. And my intent was to read all those stories and talk about them. So I wanted to come back to this one first. And coming back to it, yeah, it's wonderful. It's a fantastic story. It's really good, very pulpy, very actiony, just fantastic. Constantly up in the ante. So great story. So I just want to talk a little bit about it and about the writing. So here we go. The story Murgunstrumm starts off with the main character, Paul Hill, is in an insane asylum, essentially. He's been committed to this insane asylum and he's trying to break out. He's been plotting and planning for weeks, maybe even months, to escape. He feels certain that he was put here wrongly, and he wants to get out. And he's also extremely afraid of the dark and the night. He's extremely afraid of it, and so it's kind of a big deal that he's breaking out at night for him. And so the beginning of the story is Paul escaping from this prison, and sort of like the plan that he had to escape, and he has a getaway car with like planned with him and someone to pick him up. And so he does. He gets out. He gets in this car. It's a friend of his who is picking him up, and he asks right away where his girlfriend is. And so he's like, "Why isn't Ruth with you?" And the guy, his friend, is sort of like, "Well, we're going to go to her dad's house. We're going to go there, and just kind of won't tell him." And so Paul gets to Ruth's father's house, Mr. LaGrange, and finds out that Ruth has also been committed to a separate asylum by the same two psychiatrists that committed Paul. And there's some sort of event that has happened, something that Paul keeps alluding to. They keep talking around, but it's never mentioned. And the name Murgunstrumm keeps coming up. Right. So now Paul is on the run. He knows that they're looking for him. He kind of gets held. He kind of like goes to a bad part of town and is like holed up in a hotel, trying to decide what to do. When he comes up with a plan, and he gets his pseudo father-in-law or his girlfriend's father to get him a car to get him picked up. And there's some tension there, and they drive out to the country to this remote village, and Paul sets up shop there and starts putting in process this plan to get Ruth out of this asylum by luring these two psychiatrists out to this remote town so that he can prove to them that he and Ruth are not crazy. I'll give you a slight spoiler, which probably shouldn't be too much of a spoiler, because I think if you read about this a little bit, you'll know that this is and I think there's some hints early on. So this is a mild spoiler, but I'm going to give this little part away. Is that this is a very famous vampire story, okay, and it is really good. Like I said, it's always upping the ante. Like every little thing, there's like the tension is ratcheting up just a little bit more. Things are getting a little more desperate things are happening. I really liked how Cave really developed the story and how it sort of felt like like it kept the pace high and it kept me interested the entire read. That's something I think I've neglected to say in that earlier review, is that it's always engaging. You are always interested in what's happening in this story. It very much evokes a very classic sort of whole movie monster sort of theme, right? The vampires in the story are very classic vampires in that sense. So I should point out too, something that should be obvious, but maybe I didn't explicitly say, is that even though this collection was published in 1977, this story is from much earlier. I don't know when, probably the 30s or 40s. It feels like 30s, 40s crime fiction is what it really feels like, right? That's the tone of the beginning of this story, right? And it just slowly kind of gets into this horror and like, what is Paul so freaked out about? What is he trying to do? And it just is so, I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. It's a really good time. Totally worth like the purchase of the ebook for me. You can get this book as a physical copy. The original publication had these illustrations, and I don't think that the most recent publication has them. I'm not sure. I really debated as to whether or not I wanted to get like an original 77 publication. Like they're a little, depending on which one you find, they can be kind of pricey. I found one that was probably fairly priced, but it was just a little more than I wanted to spend. There's a reprint from the 90s, I think, that's a lot more reasonably priced, but still isn't cheap. But there's a much more recent paperback copy that's, very affordable. And this has e-formats. In fact, Cave was one of the first to adopt like e-formats for books, which I thought was interesting. And it has an Audible as well. Super good time. I don't really want to talk a whole lot more about the story because I don't want to spoil it. And the best part, what I thought was really neat, is that Murgunstrumm, who is a character in this story, is like deceptively the most frightening character. I really liked it. It did somewhat become a little bit shocking, a little bit like whoa, like that was like whoa, this is pretty crazy, Definitely at the end of the story, it really did. Like I said, it really kind of got intense, or really pushed it a little bit. There's some humorous things that I thought about later, having read the story, about some of the things that happened slightly earlier in the story and what they suggest, but I'm not going to spoil that. Maybe you can figure it out for yourself. If you like crime or detective fiction, especially crime fiction, this is really going to feel great, because it's that weird Menace genre, I guess. There was this sort of pulpish crime story that has supernatural elements, and it's just done so great. I mean, I'm going to read the rest of this short story collection, but this particular story was just such a standout story. It was so memorable. It was just awesome. Now, That is, like I said, I got that from this list that Sandy Peterson did. Sandy Peterson is probably best known for one of a couple things, either as being one of the original or the original writer for the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. He also worked on Doom and Doom 2, and I think he worked on Age of Empires. He's done a lot of like video game production. He also has a whole board game company. He makes all these great board games. Like what is the? I think he makes the. Does he make Glorantha board game? I know he makes the Cthulhu Wars board game is one of his too. So and it's very knowledgeable about that stuff too. Like if you are interested in that stuff, he has all kinds of like really great like what are the serpent people type things for like Lovecraftian horror. Really great stuff. Lots of fun. Very fun to watch his stuff. But this list is just this list of like that era of these like sort of pulpish horror stories. And you know, I've read a few of them. I've read a few already, and some I'd already had read in the past. And so I'm just going to kind of go through that list and kind of chip away at it and talk about them. I think they're great. And what's nice about it is that for the most part, these stories are available for free. Like you don't have to go and purchase anything. This short story is probably the only one that I'm aware of that you would have to buy that isn't available free. I think the ebook is pretty reasonable. Even the physical copy of the recent printing is pretty reasonable. So definitely worth checking out. I'll be excited to go through the rest of these stories in here. Lots of fun, really good stuff. I'm interested in this book about voodoo that he wrote, and also I think he wrote a lot of like voodoo stories or voodoo features in a lot of his stories. I think that seems interesting. It does. It really does. He has so much other stuff. There's lots of other like interesting little tidbits that I learned about him just reading up on him as a writer as well. So seems like a lot of fun to read. You know, just this guy who just wrote for like so long. I think he was still publishing work in the 2000s. I think he passed away in 2004. Was still writing. I think he put out a book or two still in 2000. So he was writing, you know, for 60 something years or 70 something years for a very, very long time. He was just writing, like I said, 800 something short stories to his name. And he had like various like pseudonyms. He also, which I'm really interested in this, I'm interested to look into it, made a sort of pulp hero type character called the Eel. I don't know anything about the Eel. I didn't look at anything about it. I'm really interested in learning about the Eel. I really love that name. The Eel. It's such a great pulp character name. I really like the pacing of his writing to keep to keep the tension moving, to keep the story moving, keep it fast paced. But the writing is good. That's the other thing I should mention, is that it's well written. It's pulpy, but it's not like, I don't know, vapid or just real thin. Like there's nothing there, right? Like he can write and he has good descriptions. You definitely, when he wants you to be grossed out or when he wants you to be kind of like nervous about something, he develops it. There's this great feeling at the beginning of that story, at the beginning of Murgunstrumm, about Paul like escaping and like this menace that he has, this feeling of fear that he has about the dark, and he's sort of fighting with himself and struggling with himself to be not afraid. That was really great. It's just like, oh, this is good. This is really good. I like this. So definitely excited to read more of UBK's stuff. I will keep reviewing these stories. I might end up doing a few of them together. And then I'd like to keep going on this list. I'll probably just keep like shooting a few of these out. 30 stories is great. One of them is a Lovecraft story. So that's easy. I don't remember what Lovecraft story is. So this will be a fun kind of read along we can do. Probably within the next 2 weeks, I'll have something on this so you can read it in advance if you want. And that's going to be, the next one I'm going to read is going to be The Thing in the Cellar by David Keller. I know for a fact that this is available on Horror Babble if you want to go an audio route. And I'm fairly certain that you can find e-versions of this probably for free. You'd have to search around. I don't know specifically where you can find them at, but I know that you can at least get the audio from Horror Babble. Thanks very much for watching. Hopefully we'll have this, we can get these done. Maybe we'll go a little faster than every 2 weeks, but right now this is what we're going to do because I know that I've got time to do that video between now and then. That's all for now. Thank you very much for watching. Liking and subscribing always helps. Until we meet again.